We continue our discussion on food product safety with step 2 of the HACCP process, determining your critical control points, otherwise known as CCPs. Everything that has been done so far, and especially step 1 of the HACCP process, has led us here. At this point, if everything has been done correctly, all potential hazards that are likely to cause illness or injury in the absence of their control have been identified. Step 2 determines the locations or points within the flow of food where the identified potential hazards can be controlled and reduced to safe levels, or if possible, eliminated. This point where action is required to be taken to control the threat is a critical control point. There may be one or more CCPs for a particular food item, depending upon what the food item is, its ingredients, how the product is prepared, how it is distributed, and how it is consumed by the end consumer. As one possible example, the segregation of cutting boards so that vegetables are always cut on green cutting boards, breads are cut on brown, and meats on red can help reduce a possible cross-contamination issue. Let's go through an example to ensure that step 1 and step 2 are understood. We have a 7-day cycle menu for our clientele stays typically short at 2 to 3 days. To keep this short, we will briefly review the primary part of 2 dinner entrees from one of those days. There are many other areas within the product flow that would also need to be reviewed. We are just hitting a few areas to make sure these concepts are understood. The 2 main dishes include a chicken stir-fry with rice and roast pork with gravy, with all the meals being served in a plastic insulated tray. Receiving, storage, preparation, and cooking of the meats are handled in the same fashion and are served on the same day. The vegetables and rice are received, stored, and cooked similarly, although their preparation is completed differently. The vegetables in the stir-fry are cleaned and then cut where the rice is steamed after removing from the bag. The meals are served once again in insulated covered plastic trays. In step 1, or principle 1, we would first identify the hazards that could be present, could increase, or could possibly find their way into the foods during processing. After all hazard identification has been completed, the team would then determine which hazards would need to be addressed by the HACCP plan. Reviewing the ingredient list for our entrees, we would identify several biological hazards or threats that could affect the food. The very short list includes salmonella in the chicken, Bacillus cereus in regards to the rice, trichinosis in regards to the pork, and Clostridium perfringens within the gravy. Physical hazards may include bone fragments with the chicken and pork, and even plastic fragments from any insulated trays that are worn or broken. Presented is once again a very short list. Principle 1 of HACCP will identify all possible threats, and then after all possible threats have been identified, the HACCP team will then determine which threats need to be addressed by the HACCP plan. It is important to address those hazards that are reasonably likely to result in an unacceptable health risk to consumers. This information, once completed, is then passed to step 2. Step 2 would be to determine at what points can these hazards be minimized to safe levels or prevented altogether. Understandably, safe food handling throughout the whole continuum of product flow is necessary regardless of your product. In our example, Clostridium perfringens can produce spores. So even though the gravy will be produced from scratch and used the same day, proper control of temperatures throughout the process is necessary to prevent bacterial growth at each step. Next, cooking thoroughly to safe temperatures and then holding the items at safe temperatures would be the primary ways to reduce or eliminate the other biological hazards that were identified. The physical hazard of bone fragments might include the need for the meat to be addressed by careful inspection after the items had been properly filleted by trained staff members just prior to plating. These items are all generalizations, and although they include some of the steps that can be used to mitigate the threats, they are not much of a CCP. We will use the plastic to show an example. A CCP for the trays might go something like this. The physical hazard of the plastic from the trays should be addressed by careful visual inspection of the trays after they are processed by the washing device, with any damaged, cracked, or worn trays being removed from use at that time. The trays should be set aside for further review, and if it is determined that they are at the end of life, they should be marked and then documented as removed and discarded appropriately. This shows a very simplified version of a CCP. There can be many steps within the process that address one particular item. At this point, we are ready for Principle 3, establishing critical limits for each critical control point.